Hi, today I'm going to do a short little film, and I make no apologies for the quality of the film or how jerky it is or anything else. It's just a short film to show you how to install a new head unit of Chinese origin in your Mercedes similar to mine. Now the one I chose is a Hizpo, and I think they all look pretty much the same. Now when it comes to installing these, the original car has optic fibre connection to the original head unit, and even the antenna signal and everything else is passed along as optic fibre unit. You've got two alternatives when you install one of these. You can either buy the cable that runs from the radio head unit right down to the control unit amplifier in the boot, which means that it then plugs into the speakers outputs of the control amplifier, which means that you'll be running your speakers off the built-in amp in the new head unit. If you choose to do what I did, I bought an opto coupler, which looks something like this here. You'll see it's got power connections on it and the optic fibre in. There was a little bit of confusion removing the original optic fibre out of this unit here. The optic fibre itself just clips out the back and leaves the wiring intact. It then plugs into this unit, this optic coupler, which is anywhere from about $90 on the internet up to about $150. Now what that does, that doesn't take all the signals from the radio, from the head unit. It only takes the sound signals to send to the amplifier, and to do that you connect your RCA leads of your audio output into the optic coupler. A lot of notes will tell you to plug auxiliary in to it and all sorts of silly things, and if you ask the manufacturer or the retailers what to do, they'll confuse you even more. What you're doing, you're plugging the low level signal from the front left and front right into the optic coupler to send a signal back to the main amp in the boot. This will mean that your main amp will still, the original main amp will still be your main amp, and you'll use the speakers, and the setup will be very similar to what it was with the original car. The only problem is you're only using two channels. You're using front left and front right, and you lose your ability to do the fading because you've only got two input sources going in. Now the next thing, the option is to use the CAN bus. I chose to use the CAN bus, and this is where I got into big trouble. All the instructions say to use key 1 and key 2. Now it's very confusing because the colour coding of the key 1 and key 2 is actually the same as the CAN bus wiring. Don't use it because it's for the resistive type touching, it's not for CAN bus. Ultimately in the end I found that two green wires, a green and a green black, coming out of the CAN bus converter is the CAN bus. Now to get to the CAN bus, I ran two wires from under the passenger's footwell in the case of a right-hand drive model. It's up here somewhere underneath, and you'll see, I think it's brown for black stripe and a brown, and you'll see them all come together on a common terminal. To remove that terminal, you just press the clip and you remove it sideways. Don't try and pull it out, because that's not the way it comes. It comes out sideways. And then connect CAN bus wiring to the CAN bus and bring it up through to the radio. The brown black stripe I think was negative in the car, so I thought that the green black stripe for the CAN bus connection would be the same, but it wasn't. It was the other way around, so I didn't get it to work until I reversed it. As far as the antennas goes, you'll have to run a 6-metre antenna to the boot because the antenna signal doesn't come down the opto coupling. You'll also have to run the AV lead for your reversing camera because the whole point of putting this in mainly was to get a reversing camera, which I didn't have before. If you're using a different, I'll try and get a picture of where the two green wires go into this plug. There's the top one, and there's the bottom one, in case you're using another CAN bus converter. What this basically does is the car talks to the radio via the CAN bus, and the CAN bus converter gets the right signal and feeds it into the radio. You'll find that if I can focus on this, you'll find that there's ones for different models. Try and make sure you get the right one. For this one it's a W219, but the other ones are compatible and on here, and the W219 doesn't get a mention. Also, when you set up the car, you can go to settings and go to factory settings. You'll have to put in a pin number. In this case it's 126 on this radio, and then you'll have to go to CAN bus and then select your vehicle. But all in all, the manufacturer should have selected for you. As far as getting battery and earth into this thing, the original plug for the optic coupler for the radio has battery and earth on it. Now I'm not sure which one's which between those three, but the pink wire you won't use, the brown and the red are your battery and earth. They're full battery and earth, so generally it's a yellow wire coming out of this unit which wires to your full battery and earth. There is an auxiliary one as well, and you can pick the auxiliary one up from the cigarette lighter wire, which is down there somewhere. We won't worry about it now. Now, because this fibre optic is a point-to-point loop, when you plug your CD player in, which incidentally is obsolete from now on because you'll be using the CD player and DVD player in the radio head unit, you either have to plug it into the DVD player again, or in my case I just bought a loop. But either way, you can't leave that optic loop open. It has to be through so the signal can pass through. Okay, now the big problem here, with, as I say, is that I had problems with the CAN bus. What I found I had to do, I tried these green wires a couple of times because some of the information around said to use the green wires and some of the YouTube videos said to use the green wires. Where I came unstuck, I had the battery disconnected while I did all this, and I reconnected the battery, and then I came round and I connected the CAN bus wires, and guess what? Nothing happened, because obviously the unit had booted up as soon as I'd connected the battery and looked for the CAN bus and didn't find it, so it said no CAN bus. So how I overcame that, I connected the CAN bus wires first before I put the battery back, and then voila, when I came back everything worked. I had the display on the centre of the steering wheel telling me what stations are, and I can use the volume buttons and everything works. The other thing you do, you don't need to use the Illume, or don't use it, the Illume lead. I can't get a good shot of that, but that's for the buttons on the radio itself. Lights them up at night when you've got the lights on. You don't need it because the CAN bus sends a signal to the radio and tells the radio to light the Illume, and it does it automatically via the CAN bus. The other thing is, with your reversing camera, you'll find a red wire on your lead. Where are we? If I can get a good shot, that one there. You don't need to connect that when you're using a CAN bus. All you need to do is run your video lead down to your rear view camera. The CAN bus will tell the radio when you're in reverse, and the radio will go looking for the signal from your camera in the rear. Now, what I connect the camera to, it's got CCD, AVN, and that's the camera lead in this case. So you only need one lead for the camera, for the rear view camera, and you don't need to worry about the Illume. But you will need full power, and you will need auxiliary power, which, as I say, I got from the cigarette lighter. Ignore everything on the top of the radio about key 1, key 2 and all the other things, and all the confusing messages that if you ask a question from the retailer, they might tell you, and totally ignore the brown buttons that say key 1 and key 2, or you'll get into trouble like I did. You don't need to connect anything else. You could connect the brake lead if you're going to use a video. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. I used a little device here. It's a noise suppressor on the AV leads coming out of, between the AV leads coming out of the radio and the AV leads going into the optic fibre coupler. I noticed a bit of noise and went on eBay, and sure enough they say buy a noise coupler and get rid of the noise. The other thing of the CAN bus is that the radio will stay on if you turn the ignition off. It won't go off until you remove the key from the car, because the CAN bus will tell it to stay on. So everything's pretty straightforward once you work out the CAN bus. And as I say, it's very easy to find. It's under the dashboard, and everything comes apart beautifully in this car. Everything unclips. It's very straightforward and very explanatory. Excuse all the dirt on the carpet. To run your aerial cable and your reversing camera cable, you have to unclip this. It just lifts off and unclips, snaps off. You also have to unclip the moulding from around the doors, and likewise that clips off. Now, as far as putting a fiberglass rod or something down, you can to come through, but when you get to the back door, you'll find an obstruction here. So this has to come off. This door lining has to come off, and this part here between the seat, I've pulled it off this side and I managed to get the wires under. Everything's very easy. It's very easy to run the wires to the back, and it's likewise very easy to run the wires from the dashboard. I chose to use the GPS aerial that came with the camera, came with the radio at least. You possibly could use the original one, but you'd have to run a wire right down to the boot to pick up the factory GPS unit. And quite frankly, I got sick of things at that stage. Now, coming to the boot, you probably can't see it, but there's some bolts in there that hold the main amp control unit in, and the wiring's all down there. Most people say, well, you pull that out to tap into the antenna, or unplug the antenna and put your one in. But what I did, I just felt here and I found two black wires. One was the GPS antenna and the other was the antenna, the built-in antenna for the car. Now you'll see I've used a capacitor there, and I've teed it into the original aerial wire. Now the reason for this is that these have an antenna amp somewhere up there in the car, and a remote power feed from the control unit, which means on this wiring here, instead of just having the signal coming for the antenna to the radio, you have negative and positive. Now if you don't isolate it with a capacitor back to the radio won't like it. So what I've done, I've made sure that the antenna wire where I've cut it continues through, because you still need to feed your power amplifier, your antenna amplifier, but you need to couple your antenna that you're bringing from the front of the car, that's that 6 metre lead I was talking about. You need to couple it in to the existing antenna wire, and I used a small value capacitor. If I can get a focus on that, and I can't. I used a small value capacitor here to isolate the DC back to the radio. But when you buy these radios, you'll find there is an antenna extension piece. It will do the same thing, but I chose not to use it rather than have too much stuff under the dashboard behind the radio. But either way, you'll have to isolate the antenna wire going to the radio from the antenna wire in the car from a DC point of view, not an AC point of view, of course, because you'll lose the signal. Now, when I wired up the reversing camera, it was pretty easy. I just used a bridging connector, and the wire was a yellow slate. So that activates the camera, which is up under here. There's the leads for it. You need negative and positive to it, and you also need your AV lead going back to the radio. It's all pretty simple. I picked up a ground here, which is a brown wire, which someone else has had a go at before, so that was all right. And I picked up, of course, the negative drop rate to positive at least. The positive to operate the camera comes from a reversing light globe, which is coupled on there. So I just ran that yellow wire through and then fed it up through the little plug, power plug that comes with the camera. Now the camera I chose is an aftermarket one made for this car. Works very well. All you do is pull out the existing number plate light, which looks like this, and the camera takes up half the space. The existing globe plugs back in again at the back. You probably lose half your number plate illumination, and then you get the camera at the same time. So remember, the CAN bus turns on the camera. You don't need that red wire that comes with the AV wire when you buy one of these. I think it's pretty straightforward from then on. I need to put the DVD player back. I'm getting alarms telling me something wrong about with the security of the car as far as safety goes, because obviously on your DVD player you won't be using it as a DVD player, but you got your hazard warning and you got your passenger airbag off and a few other things on there. So you need to put that back and run the wiring, plug everything in as it was before. Everything is easy to get apart. It uses these pressing clips. In most cases, some cases it's torque screws, so to get these out you just prise the centre up and pull the whole unit out. Replacement ones are easily available online, and yeah, everything else works pretty well. The radio works well, I'm pleased with it. It's a bit disappointing that I can't use the fader, but I'll live with that. The sound sounds good, and it's still using the original amplifier and the original wiring all hidden behind there. Just a matter of interest while I did it, Mercedes don't put a dampener on these boot trunk lids, or boot lids as we say in Australia, and they spring up pretty quick and pretty violent. What I did with mine, I just moved the spring along to the last hole to take the tension off the spring, and it's enough to open the boot, but it's not enough to make it fly up in your face and appear to be unpleasant like it was before. Now when I put all this wiring back, I'll just make sure it's all insulated and it'll all sit nicely behind the side covers. Okay, I hope that helps you out a lot, because I spent many days on this and many emails back to the retailer, and not only did they speak a different language to me, but they didn't understand what I was saying. And the other thing with these is they've got a USB connector, so you can put a camera in the car, traffic monitoring camera, or you can just run the USB through and play music via USB stick. On the radio itself, it has all these RCA outputs, smart speakers and that. They're low signal outputs, and they're designed for when you're using a different amplifier as the signal source for that amplifier. You don't need them. You only need left and right to go into your optic decoupler, and that's about it. I cut all the speaker wires off the back of the plug. You probably can't see it, but they're the output from the amplifier that actually drive the speakers. If you decide to use a slave cable instead of using the opto coupler, you'll still use those. You'll plug them in this end of the cable, and the other end will go on the plug that comes out of the amp control, the original factory amp control unit in the boot, and you'll bypass it altogether. You'll be using the power amplifier in this unit here. Okay, I hope that helps. Thank